Okay, so before we start the video, I just want to say that I would really appreciate it if everybody shared this video, because I think that what I'm talking about here is really important from a musical perspective. Hey man, David Gilmour doesn't use scales and theory and stuff. He just plays by feel, man. He knows the notes that'll make you cry. Hey guys, Skylar Carson here from Music is Victory, here to show you how to play like David Gilmour today. So first, what you want to do is you want to play the minor pentatonic scale like this. And then you want to play the minor diatonic scale like this. And then you want to play the Dorian diatonic scale like this. And then you want to do some small bends like this. And then you want to do some big bends like this. And that's pretty much it. That's how you sound like David Gilmour. You're all wrong about David Gilmour, and here's why. So the reason why I'm going to be doing a whole series of videos on David Gilmour and his playing is because I see his style being really mischaracterized and misrepresented in online discourse in general, but especially on this platform. And as a Pink Floyd fan, I think that that's a real shame, because I think that there's a lot that young players could learn from David Gilmour, provided that they learn it correctly, and there's just not a lot of people on this platform that I've seen, and I've looked for them, that are teaching his style correctly. In summary, if you go on YouTube and look up things like how to sound like David Gilmour, how to play like David Gilmour, you'll get one of two things mainly. You'll get a bunch of idiots who claim that David Gilmour doesn't actually know that much about playing guitar, and that he just kind of plays by feel, that he doesn't necessarily think a lot about what he's playing, but still somehow manages to play all of the right notes. Or you'll get someone who's actually reasonably well informed and pretty highly trained, but they try to oversimplify Dave's style into something like a single scale or a couple of small or large bends that Dave happens to do in a couple of famous Pink Floyd solos. And that is not really anything like what Dave is actually doing, in my opinion. I think that he's actually thinking a lot when he plays, and that he's not thinking about scales at all when he plays, and we'll get into that in later videos. So today we're going to be taking a look at one of Dave's solos from a very famous Pink Floyd song. Yes, it is Comfortably Numb. Those who are saying comfortably numb at home, give yourself a hand, you guessed correctly. But more specifically, we're actually going to look at the first solo, because in my opinion, that's the one that really shows off what's great about Dave's playing and what people need to learn about Dave's playing if they want to play like Dave. There's a lot of good stuff in Dave's playing that I think young players can and should learn, because it's stuff that they will use for as long as they play the guitar. So the chord progression for the first guitar solo in Comfortably Numb is D major, A major, D major, A major, C major, G major, C major, G major, and then A major to C major to G major to D major. So Comfortably Numb is in the key of B minor, but it does sometimes modulate to D major, which is actually the same key, just with a different chord acting as the tonic. Now, the way that most guitar players, especially rock guitar players, would approach this song is they would first ask what key this is in, which is in B minor or D major, and then they would look at the chords and try and figure out how many of those chords are in the key. So in this part of the song, where the chords are mainly D, A, C, and G, the chords that are in the key are D, A, and G. But the C chord is not in the key. And that's a really important detail, because if you're only thinking about the key center and not the individual chords, you're going to play a few wrong notes. For example, the key of B minor doesn't have a C natural, it has a C sharp in it. So if you tried to play a C sharp over a C major chord, you would get this sound. You hear that dissonance? Now there is technically a way to play through this part of the song using only the B minor scale, but I'm not going to tell you what it is because that would undermine the point that I'm trying to make in this video. So the way that a trained musician might look at this chord progression is they'd say, okay, maybe there's more than one key happening here. Maybe the D chord and the A chord are in one key, and then maybe the C and the G chord are in one key. So if you just switch from D major to C major when you get to the part that's the C and the G chord, then maybe you wouldn't play any wrong notes. And I do think that that's generally the correct way to look at this chord progression, but I don't think that that's how Dave is thinking about it, and I'll explain why. So something that jazz players generally do, especially in songs like this where the chords don't change very fast, is they treat every chord like its own little key signature. And that essentially allows them to play notes that aren't in the key, but do sound good over that chord. And I'll give an example here. So in the key of D major, the key of D major has a G natural. But the key of A major has a G sharp. So if we're playing over the D major chord, we would use the D major scale with the G natural in it. And that's a perfectly good note to target the third of the D major, which is an F sharp. Because it has a natural tendency to move down by half step. But over the A major chord, the F sharp is not the third anymore, so we don't really have any need to target it by half step. So we can play G sharp instead and use that either as a chord extension, like a major seventh chord. There it is in the higher octave. Or we can use it to target the root of the chord, which is the A, like this. And I think that that's a lot closer to what Dave is doing, because his style is characterized by hitting these really emotional notes that are sometimes a bit unexpected, but normally fall within the key. Alright, so to prove my point about how I think that Gilmour isn't thinking about the key signature when he plays the first solo, I'm going to take a solo over these chords, and I am going to think about the key signature. And when it gets to that C chord, I'm going to really lean into that C sharp to show you that it's really not how you want to approach anything if you want to solo in the style of Gilmour. So like I said before, that C sharp really does not sound good against the C major chord. I mean, that type of sound is a part of some types of music, but it's really not a part of Pink Floyd's music, and it's really not something that Dave Gilmour has played in any of the solos I've listened to. So now I'm going to play a second solo, and this time I'm going to take the approach that I think that Dave is taking, where I treat every chord like its own key signature. Let's see what happens. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that sounded a lot better to me. And after going back and re-listening to it, by my own count, I only played 5 or 6 passing tones, which means that every other note that I played, not that there were that many, was either a chord tone or a chord extension. But there's an even crazier part, which is that I wasn't even trying to sound like David Gilmour when I played that solo, and yet we can already hear the molecules of Gilmour's style beginning to materialize. It's my opinion that this approach is so core to Gilmour's style that it's kind of hard not to sound at least a little bit like him if you take the same approach. But this isn't limited to just David Gilmour. This is the same way that jazz players generally approach improvisation, especially on songs with really slow chord changes. This is an approach that's going to work in pretty much any music style regardless of context. The other thing is that since the notes we play are based on the chord that's sounding at the moment we play them, it's kind of impossible to play a bad note, at least by accident, if you take this approach. And this is something that people just don't talk about when they talk about Gilmour. They focus on his bends, or they tell you to just use the regular minor scale, and that's not what he's doing. It's stuff that he will do on songs where it works, but the chord dictates his playing, and that's the thing that no one talks about, that everyone misses when they try to play like Gilmour. And it's also the way that you should play if you want to play like Dave. Alright, that's the video, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'd appreciate a share on this video since this is something that I don't think anyone's really covered the right way on YouTube. And go follow me on Instagram if you haven't already. My goal is to get to 10,000 subscribers so that I can unlock some features that'll make it even easier for me to share my videos with you and connect with other people. Now, if you'd excuse me, the music calls.